The stagecoach rattled into dry mesa just after midday, its wheels kicking up a cloud of red dust that hung over the street like smoke. Townsfolk paused in their errands, some out of curiosity, others with narrowed eyes sharpened by old prejudice. Inside the coach, Nalina Grace clutched a small satchel in her lap, her fingers knotted around the faded leather strap. Her dress, though simple, was clean, and her long dark braid had been brushed with care. She'd traveled 4 days across the desert for a promise written in ink. A new beginning. She was to be a wife. Nalina's heart had dared to hope. She had answered the ad honestly, included her photograph, even signed her full name. Nalina Grace Whitlock, daughter of Margaret Whitlock and Chief Talakai of the White Rock Apache. She hadn't hidden her bloodline, nor did she apologize for it. The man who wrote back, Charles D. Albright, seemed kind. His letters were clipped but polite. He promised land, protection, and most importantly, respect. But when the coach door opened and her boots hit the packed dirt, what greeted her was not warmth, but a sneer. Charles stood with 2 other men outside the general store. He stepped forward, eyeing her like a man inspecting a flawed shipment. "You're the bride?" Nalina lifted her chin. "Yes, sir, Nalina Grace." A tense pause. Then Charles scoffed. "You didn't say you were one of them." The word stung more than the wind ever could. "I was clear," she said, voice steady. "My mother was white, my father Apache. I have both." He turned to the men beside him. "This ain't what I ordered." One of them chuckled. "You gonna send her back or trade her off?" Heat rose in Nalina's cheeks. Not shame, but fury held down like fire behind stone. She turned away before they could see her tears. Across the street, a tall cowboy leaned on a rail post, watching the whole thing unfold. His name was Elias Ward. He was used to being on the edges of things, conversations, dances, expectations. His scars weren't on the skin, but they'd made people turn away all the same. But when he saw Nalina walk off alone, dust swirling around her and dignity cracking with each step, something inside him shifted. He pushed off the post and followed. "Ma'am?" he called gently. She stopped but didn't turn. "If you're here for another laugh, I've had enough." "No, ma'am," Elias said. "I was going to ask if you need a place to sit. There's a bench out back of the livery, in the shade." She turned slowly, surprised not just by the voice, but by the kindness in it. And for the first time since the coach had stopped, she didn't feel like something unwanted. She felt seen. The bench behind the livery was half-rotted and weather-worn, but it sat in the cool shadow of a cottonwood tree that rustled gently in the breeze. Nalina lowered herself onto it with the slow grace of someone exhausted, not just from travel, but from carrying years of judgment. Elias stood nearby, hands tucked in his belt, giving her distance. He wasn't the kind of man who pushed his presence into a space. He simply offered it, quiet, steady, patient. "I saw what happened," he said finally. Nalina didn't look up. "I'm sure the whole town did. They'll forget by sundown. This place doesn't have much to do except watch wagons and gossip." She allowed herself the soft exhale, almost a laugh. "You're not from here?" "Was," he said. "Now I just pass through when the horses need rest." "And you?" "Texas-born, Montana-broken." He said it without bitterness, like a man who had come to terms with the road. "You?" "New Mexico," she said. "My mother died when I was 6. My father raised me on Apache land until the missions came. Then I was taught to sit straight, speak little, and marry someone who wanted a polite bride with exotic looks." Elias didn't flinch. "I've never much cared for men who want quiet wives." They sat in silence for a time, listening to the rustle of leaves and distant hammering from a blacksmith shop. Then Elias spoke again, softly. "He was wrong." "Who?" "That man, Albright. He was wrong to speak to you like that. You didn't deserve it." Nalina met his gaze. His eyes were the color of storm-clouded skies, gray, unreadable, but not unkind. "I thought I could start a life here," she said. "Instead, I stepped off that coach and became a warning." Elias's voice dropped to a hush. "Maybe the mistake wasn't coming here. Maybe it was trusting the wrong man to meet you." She studied him. The dust on his boots, the scar just beneath his chin, the way his hand rested near his sidearm, not out of threat, but reflex. This wasn't a man trying to fix her, or pity her. He was simply showing up. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" he asked. "No, I was supposed to go home with—" "Well, you saw how that ended." "You can have my room above the stable," Elias offered. "I'll sleep in the hayloft. It's not much, but it's clean, and the rain won't find you there." She hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I know what it feels like to be turned away for something you didn't choose." That night, as she laid beneath a wool blanket that smelled faintly of pine and horsehair, Nalina looked out the window toward the livery below. Elias was down there sleeping among the horses under the stars, and for the first time since stepping off that cursed coach, She didn't feel rejected. She felt safe. The smell of cornbread and coffee drifted up through the floorboards the next morning, warm and earthy. Nalina stirred on the cot above the livery stable, blinking against the golden light that seeped through the window. She hadn't dreamed. She'd simply rested. It had been a long time since sleep felt like safety instead of escape. Downstairs, Elias was bent over the stove, flipping skillet bread with a steady hand. He looked up as she stepped down the ladder, still barefoot, hair loose around her shoulders. He didn't stare. He didn't comment. He just handed her a tin cup. Strong coffee, careful. She took it, the warmth of it grounding her. You cook? Enough not to starve. That puts you ahead of most men I've met. He smirked faintly. So what's your plan now? He asked as they sat on opposite hay bales, eating in quiet. Nalina chewed slowly, then answered. I was going to be a wife, that was the plan. That's not the same as a dream. She looked at him sharply. No, I suppose it's not. After breakfast, Elias offered to walk her into town to check for stagecoach updates. She agreed, hesitantly, uncertain whether she was ready to face the looks again. But when they walked down the main road together, side by side, slow and calm, something shifted. People looked, yes, but not with the same sneering judgment as yesterday. Maybe it was the way Elias walked beside her, relaxed but unmistakably protective. Maybe it was how he tipped his hat to every person they passed, daring anyone to challenge his presence at her side. Or maybe it was simply that she no longer walked alone. They stopped by the post office. No mail, no coach until Friday. At the Mercantile, Elias bought her a new scarf without asking. Just held it up to her shoulder and said, Suede'll burn your neck by noon. She opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Sometimes kindness doesn't need permission. Outside the store, Charles Albright stood by his wagon, pretending not to watch. But Nalina saw the flicker in his eyes. Surprise, then something closer to shame, as Elias gently helped her up onto the buckboard. Funny, Elias called out, not even looking Charles's way. Some men don't know what they've lost until someone else knows what they've found. Charles turned away. Nalina said nothing, but she held her chin a little higher as they rolled away. That night the rain came softly, not the crashing, blinding kind that tore at the land, but the whispering drizzle that seemed to soothe the dust right off the world. It tapped gently against the barn roof as Elias lit the lantern and passed her a worn wool blanket. You sleep here tonight, he said, motioning to the cot again. I'll keep to the saddle room. You don't have to do that, Nalina said, surprised. I know, he replied. That's why I'm doing it. After a long moment of quiet, her voice broke through the hush of the storm. Why do you live out here alone? Elias sat down on a hay bale, his frame half lit by the warm lantern glow. For a while, he didn't answer. Then he said, Once had a brother, younger. Got killed in a mining accident I should have stopped him from walking into. That was the start of it. I'm sorry, she said softly. Then came a woman, beautiful, loud laugh. Said she liked my quiet. But when life got hard, quiet didn't hold her. She left. He shrugged, eyes fixed on some memory only he could see. After that, the silence suited me. Nalina sat across from him, her arms wrapped around her knees. I was supposed to be invisible, she whispered. He looked at her. What do you mean? My mother was Apache, my father white. I was raised in two worlds that both called me not enough. When I was little, I used to think if I could just be quiet enough, good enough, maybe someone would forget to hate me. Elias leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. I don't see not enough when I look at you. That's because you don't look at me like most men do. He smiled faintly. I look at you like you're a person. That used to be standard around here. The rain deepened, rhythmic and steady. Elias? She asked suddenly. Yeah? Do you think it's possible that some detours are just the road we were always supposed to take? He looked at her for a long time. I do now. That night they slept apart. But something had shifted. Not romance. Not yet. But something deeper than comfort had started to grow between them. Trust. And trust, Nalina thought as she drifted into sleep, was rarer than love in the Wild West. Morning came with the chirp of robins and the distant sound of cattle lowing across the field. Nalina rose early, the wool blanket still warm from the night before, and stepped out into the misty dawn. She found Elias already up, working at the fence line, his coat damp from the morning dew, and his brow furrowed in quiet focus. You start early, she said, approaching slowly. Fences don't fix themselves, he replied, but there was a slight softness in his tone now. He looked up and added, Did you sleep all right? I did, first peaceful night in a while. He nodded, then gestured to the barn. There's hot coffee on the stove inside, goat milk if you like it. Goat milk? She teased, raising an eyebrow. I never said this was a fancy ranch, Elias smirked. Inside the house, Nalina explored quietly. The place was worn but cared for. Books stacked on a shelf, a rifle over the mantel, and faded portraits tucked into frames. Elias with a younger boy beside him, then a woman with stormy eyes and a crooked grin. She touched the frame lightly. His family. Ghosts he still lived with. She was pouring herself coffee when a loud tap-tap came at the door. Elias opened it. Standing there was a boy, no older than 15, soaked to the bone with a telegraph envelope in his trembling hands. "Mr. Brandt?" the boy asked. "That's me. This came from town, said it was urgent." Elias took the note, nodded to the boy, and handed him a coin. As the boy disappeared into the mist, Elias unfolded the message. His eyes scanned the lines and something in his jaw tightened. "Everything okay?" Nalina asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, handing her the note, he muttered, "You might want to read this." The telegram read, "To Elias Brandt, Oak Hollow. Stop hiding half-breed women on your ranch. We don't want her here. Send her back or face consequences." There was no name, no signature, just hate, cold and anonymous. Nalina's hands trembled slightly as she folded the note back. "It started again," she said, voice barely a whisper. "Not on my land, it hasn't," Elias said firmly. "You don't have to protect me, Elias." "I'm not protecting you," he said, stepping closer. "I'm standing beside you. There's a difference." But that night, after she went to sleep, Elias sat alone on the porch with his rifle across his lap, watching the trees, listening for hooves, because he knew one thing about men who sent letters like that. They didn't stop at words. The sun hadn't yet climbed over the ridge when the hooves came pounding. Elias was already outside, shotgun in hand. Not raised, just ready. Nalina stood behind him at the doorway, her eyes wide but unblinking. But it wasn't a mob. It was just one man, and she knew him. "Taw," Nalina breathed, stepping forward. The rider pulled the reins, his horse dancing beneath him. He was Apache, tall and lean, wrapped in a dusty blanket, and bearing the kind of face that held storms behind calm eyes. "Sister," he said, dismounting. "What are you doing here?" she asked in Apache. "I came because of this." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded newspaper. "They printed your name in Prescott. Said a half-blood fled from a white town and was being sheltered by a criminal cowboy." Elias scoffed quietly. "Nice of them to give me a title." "They mean to come for you," Toe said, "but not just the men from town." He paused. "The man you ran from, he's posted a bounty." Nalina went pale. Elias's jaw clenched. "How much?" $200 alive, 100 otherwise." Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to stop. Inside, they sat around the table. Toe unfolding the map he'd drawn by hand. It showed routes, names, whispers from the Apache scouts. "He's coming himself," Toe added. "Your husband." Nalina's voice broke slightly. "He wasn't my husband, just the man who bought me. And now he's hunting you. He wants to make you an example." "Then we don't run," Elias said, voice low. "We make a stand." Taw looked at him, unreadable. "You'd fight white men for an Apache woman?" "No," Elias said, staring straight into the fire. "I'd fight any man who thinks a person can be owned." That night, plans were drawn. Taw agreed to stay. He'd ride to the nearby settlement of Dove Rock, where some Apache families lived hidden in the canyon shadows. They'd warned them, too. He left before dawn. And Elias taught Nalina to shoot. "It's not the bullet that matters," he told her. "It's knowing you can use it." Her hands were steady as she aimed at the post and fired. "A clean hit." "I've never held one before," she whispered. "You were born holding fire," Elias said. "You just didn't know it." But even as they fortified the ranch, dug earthworks, checked the locks, and looked to the ridgelines, Elias knew the enemy wasn't just coming with guns. It was coming with power, with law twisted by prejudice, with gold. And in towns like this, gold still spoke louder than truth. The quiet before the storm was almost cruel. Nalina walked the porch of the ranch house with her hair braided tight and her rifle in hand. Each creak of the boards beneath her feet sounded louder in the still air. Inside, Elias sharpened his axe, not because he expected to use it, but because it steadied his nerves. The sun was still climbing when dusk kicked up from the southern trail. "Company," Elias muttered, stepping onto the porch beside her. From the ridge came 5 riders, slow and deliberate. They wore clean coats and had rifles slung lazily across their backs. Not the kind of men who lived rough, but the kind who bought men to do it for them. And in the center was him. "James Callister," Nalina whispered. The man who'd once called her property. He hadn't changed much, still smug, still polished like a snake in church clothes. "Miss Nalina," he said with a sickening smile. "Or should I say, Mrs. Callister?" Elias stepped forward. "She ain't yours, never was." Callister ignored him. "You ran from a legal contract, girl. I paid good money to have you brought west. And now you've been hiding out with this outlaw." "That contract was written in lies and sealed in fear," Nalina said. I never agreed. And even if I had, your fists ended that deal the moment they landed. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes burned. You belong to me. Elias raised his shotgun slowly. Wrong ranch for that talk. Callister chuckled and held up his hands, mock innocent. Now I'm a reasonable man. I don't want blood, I just want what's mine. You give her up quietly, and this doesn't become a hanging offense. Then you better bring your rope, Elias growled, 'cause she's not going anywhere. One of the riders shifted in his saddle. The tension snapped like a drawn wire. Careful, Elias warned. I've got friends in the canyon. Apache friends. If you ride in here swinging, you won't ride out. Callister's eyes flicked, uncertain now. Nalina stepped forward. You're scared, aren't you? She said softly. Because this time you're not the one holding the key. She raised her rifle, not shaking. This time I do. Callister sneered but pulled back on the reins. This isn't over. It is for you, Elias said. The men turned. Dust trailed behind them as they rode out. Heads low, hands twitching near triggers, but not brave enough to draw. That night, Nalina sat beside Elias under the stars. You believed in me, she said. You didn't need me to believe, he replied. You just needed time to believe in yourself. She leaned against him, eyes soft. I think I finally do. The weeks after Callister's retreat felt like spring after a hard winter. Everything blooming, everything uncertain. Nalina helped mend the roof. She read the newspaper aloud while Elias carved fence posts. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, and still the silence was warmer than most words. But quiet didn't mean peace, because while the threat outside had ridden off, the storm inside Elias had only begun. He stood at the edge of the field one morning, staring at the crooked old gravestone. The name was weather-worn, but she knew who it belonged to. Clara, his late wife. Nalina approached quietly, fingers brushing her skirt. You come here every Thursday, she said gently. Elias nodded without looking at her. She liked Thursdays, said it smelled sweeter. And you still love her? He turned to her then, haunted, uncertain. I think I'll always love her, but that ain't the part that's hard. What is? The part where I started loving someone else, without meaning to. Nalina's breath caught. You don't have to say it, she whispered. But I want to, he said, stepping closer. I just don't know if it's fair. Fair? She blinked. Do you think love waits for fairness? He looked at her then, the way a man looks at a second chance he never asked for. I don't want to compare you to her, Nalina. You're not her shadow. You're your own storm. But you're the first person who made this place feel like a home again. Her voice trembled. And you're the first man who ever asked what I felt. Before taking what he wanted, he reached for her hand, slow and reverent. So tell me what you want, Nalina. Not what you owe. Not what anyone expects. Just what you want. She took a deep breath, then said the words with her whole chest. I want a life that doesn't begin with escape. I want mornings where I'm not afraid. I want you, if you'll have me. He didn't answer with words. He pulled her gently into his arms, forehead resting against hers like a vow. And for the first time in years, neither of them was running. Rain came softly that Monday morning. Elias was repairing the porch while Nalina swept flour across the table for bread. Her hair was braided back, face glowing with calm she hadn't worn in years. Then the knock came. 3 fast raps, urgent, out of place. Elias opened the door with one hand still holding a hammer. A young boy stood outside, soaked through. He held out a crumpled envelope addressed in thick black ink. You Elias Turner? I am. Message from Sheriff McTavish in 3 Rivers. Said it's about a woman named Nalina. Elias stiffened. Thank you, son, he said, sliding a coin into the boy's hand. The boy ran back to the muddy road. Elias turned and closed the door slowly. Nalina was already standing, hands white with flour, eyes locked on the envelope. The letter was brief. To Elias Turner, a man came into town asking for a woman matching Nalina's description. Says he's her legal husband. Claims she fled with his belongings. We're holding him for disorderly conduct, but he's persistent. Thought you ought to know. Sheriff McTavish. She read it twice, then sat down hard in the nearest chair. Elias stood still, watching her. Is it true? Her voice was almost too quiet to hear. His name is Jed Barrow. He bought me from my uncle. Said I'd pay off a debt. But it was never about that. It was power. Pain. She looked up, fire flickering behind her eyes. He doesn't want me back. He wants to own the version of me he thinks I still am. But I'm not. Not anymore. Elias knelt in front of her, hands gentle on her knees. You don't have to run again. You don't understand. He always finds me. He's not just cruel, he's careful. Law says I was his property, even if it never said so out loud. Elias's jaw clenched. Not anymore. If he drags me back, he won't, Elias cut her off. How can you be sure? He leaned in close, voice low and firm. Because this land, this home, this us, it's built on something stronger than fear. He can't take what we choose to protect together. Outside, the storm rolled in. Inside, they prepared together, not just to defend what they had, but to finally face what once made them run. The next morning, Elias saddled his horse. He packed light, just a rifle, canteen, and the folded letter from Sheriff McTavish. Nalina didn't argue. She simply placed her hand on his chest and said, "Don't go to fight for me. Go to remind him I'm not his anymore." Elias nodded once. "I'm not going to fight. I'm going to end it." 3 Rivers wasn't far, but the ride was heavy. Every fence post and prairie mile brought Elias closer to the man who had broken Nalina's spirit for years and now threatened to steal her peace again. By dusk, he reached the sheriff's office. Sheriff McTavish, a thick-chested man with deep creases under his eyes, tipped his hat. "Turner, I figured you'd come." "Where is he?" "Cell in the back. Been hollering about his woman since sunup." Elias's knuckles tightened. "I want to talk to him." McTavish raised an eyebrow. "Alone?" "Yes." The sheriff hesitated, then stepped aside. The man in the cell was as rotten as the story suggested. Jed Barrow's eyes lit up when he saw Elias. "You, the half-breed's new toy." Elias didn't flinch. "She's not yours, Jed. Never was." Jed stood slowly, voice greasy with venom. "I paid for her. Took care of her. She owes me." "She doesn't owe you anything. You think just because you warmed her bed for a few weeks you know her?" Elias stepped forward, his voice steady. "I know she still wakes in cold sweats. I know she flinches at loud footsteps. I know she looks over her shoulder when a wagon creaks." Jed smirked. "Soft men like you don't last long. She'll come crawling back when she realizes you can't protect her from the world." "She's not the one who needs protecting." Elias turned to leave, but paused. "You're not walking out of here, Jed. And if you ever come near her again, it won't be the law you'll have to answer to. It'll be me." Outside, McTavish asked, "What now?" Elias handed him a folded paper. "That's her signed statement. Abuse, unlawful captivity, forced labor. I've got 3 witnesses ready to back it." McTavish whistled low. "Enough to keep him locked up?" Elias nodded. "Or get him run out of every town west of the Rockies." That night, Elias rode home. When Nalina saw him, her eyes searched his face for an answer. He didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms and whispered, "You're free." "Really?" "He's not coming back. And if he does, he won't get far." She didn't cry. Instead, she smiled. A smile that belonged to the woman she was becoming, not the one she had survived. 2 weeks passed. The cabin felt warmer now, not from the fire, but from the laughter echoing off the logs. Nalina was planting herbs in the small garden behind the house when she looked up and said quietly, "There are other girls, still trapped like I was." Elias wiped his hands on his jeans. "You want to find them?" She nodded. "I want to give them somewhere to go, somewhere safe." That evening they sat at the table with maps spread wide, a blank ledger, and a pencil sharpened to a nervous point. "We don't have much," Elias said. "We have land," she replied, "and people who believe in right over silence." They began writing names of women Nalina had known, women who had vanished, whispers of wives bought and broken. Over the next months, the ranch changed. The stable, once filled with silence, now housed beds with patchwork quilts. The spare barn was cleaned out and turned into a common hall with warm bread on the table and blankets folded by the fire. They called it Cedar Refuge. And the first girl to arrive knocked just after dawn one Monday morning. She was bruised, hungry, silent. Nalina didn't ask questions. She just opened the door wider and said, "Come in, you're safe now." Word spread. 1 girl turned into 5, then 10. Nalina sewed at night. Elias built extra bunk beds. By spring, they had to expand the kitchen. One day, an older woman named Marlene sat on the porch and asked Nalina, "Why are you doing this? You could have just disappeared into a quiet life with your man." Nalina looked toward the hills. "Because I was supposed to be forgotten, and I refused." "So you made a home?" "No, I made a beginning." Meanwhile, Elias was approached by a young sheriff from a nearby town. "Heard what y'all are doing. Some folks don't like it." "And you?" "I think it's about damn time someone did." He handed Elias a folder, dozens of names, more girls. "They might come looking." Elias only said, "We'll be ready." That night, Nalina stood outside beneath the stars. Elias wrapped his arms around her waist. "You know you started a movement, right?" "No," she said softly. "I just built the place I always needed." The wind changed in late May. It came down from the north, colder than it should have been, rattling the windows of Cedar Refuge like a warning. That morning a stranger arrived, not a girl in need. A man, tall, clean boots, hat tipped too low to see his eyes. He didn't knock. He just waited outside the fence, still as stone, until Elias walked out to meet him. "Can I help you, stranger?" "Looking for a woman," the man said, his voice smooth like whiskey and just as dangerous. "Apache blood. Took something that was mine." Elias didn't flinch. "Ain't no property here but cattle and courage. Which one you come for?" The man's eyes lifted, gray and dead, and for a moment Elias swore he recognized the cold in them. Then the man smiled. She'll know me. Tell her Elijah Cole stopped by. Inside, Nalina dropped the bowl she was drying. Did you say Elijah Cole? Elias nodded, jaw tight. You know him? She backed away from the table, her voice trembling. He's the man who tried to sell me twice. You said your uncle. He wasn't. Not by blood. He bought me off my mother's friend and called it adoption. Raised me like livestock. Promised me to the highest bidder the moment I turned 16. Elias clenched his fists. And now he's here? Now he knows I survived. That night, the refuge locked its doors for the first time. Elias stood guard outside with a rifle across his lap. The women inside whispered stories, fear mixing with candlelight. But Nalina didn't hide. She sat in the rocking chair staring into the fire, her hands tight around the locket Elias had given her. The next day a letter arrived. Slipped under the gate, folded neat. You stole what was mine. You owe me. I'm coming to collect. Nalina looked at Elias. He wants to burn it all down. Elias only said, Then we show him what happens when a man tries to burn a woman who's already walked through fire. They gathered everyone that night, explained who Elijah was, what he wanted, why they would not run. Some women cried. Others offered to leave to protect the rest. But Nalina stood tall. We built this together. We protect it together. They trained. They dug trenches, reinforced doors, taught every woman how to shoot and how to signal. Elias rode to town, spoke with the sheriff. The sheriff didn't ask for details. He just handed him a box of ammunition and nodded. We stand with you. The wind kept blowing. But inside Cedar Refuge, firelight danced across steady eyes and calloused hands. Nalina no longer flinched at the past, because now she was writing a new one. It happened just before dawn. A sharp sound like hooves on hard earth echoed through the mist, then another, and then silence. Elias was already at the door, rifle in hand. Nalina joined him, lacing her boots without a word. He's here, she said. Not a question, just truth. They stepped outside together, the cold morning air biting through their shirts. And there he was, Elijah Cole, sitting atop a black horse at the tree line, hat low, coat long and ragged like a vulture's wings. Behind him, 2 more men, rough, silent shadows more than people. Shadows. You know why I'm here? Elijah called, voice casual. You're trespassing, Elias answered. You ride out now, we let you keep your boots. Elijah chuckled. You always did think you were the hero ranch boy. This ain't about you. Then his eyes fixed on Nalina. It's her. She owes me. Nalina stepped forward, heart steady now. I owe you nothing. You tried to sell me. You tried to break me. But I walked away. I built something better. Built it out of lies, Elijah growled. That blood in your veins? You think these folks will still stand with you when they know? Elias raised the rifle. We don't care what's in her blood. We care what's in her spine. And it's made of steel. That was the moment Elijah pulled his gun, but he never got to fire, because a sharp whistle split the air, and 6 rifles appeared from behind hay bales, rooftops, and the barn. The women of Cedar Refuge were ready. And they didn't miss. One of Elijah's men went down. The other dropped his weapon and ran. Elijah hesitated, hand shaking, then turned and tried to gallop off, but his horse bucked at the sound of gunfire, sending him sprawling to the dirt. By the time he looked up, Nalina was standing over him, rifle aimed, hands steady, eyes full of storm. You don't get to hurt anyone else. But she didn't shoot. She turned away. We are not like you. Elijah was dragged away by the sheriff an hour later. Nobody offered him water. Nobody said goodbye. He was just gone. The refuge was quiet again. That evening, Nalina sat on the porch as the sun fell behind the hills. Elias brought her a cup of coffee and sat beside her. You didn't take the shot. I didn't need to. They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder. Around them, the laughter of women filled the air. Children chased chickens. Someone strummed a guitar. And in that moment, Nalina smiled. He tried to erase me. Instead, I built something that will outlive us both. The winds of summer swept across Cedar Refuge, carrying dust, seeds, and the scent of new life. With Elijah gone, the fear that had once gripped the women's hearts slowly loosened its hold. But Nalina knew freedom was never permanent unless you built it. So she started building. It began with the barn. It's not just for hay anymore, she told Elias, smiling. He raised an eyebrow. What is it then? A school. The walls were swept clean. Crates turned into desks. A broken chalkboard was carried from the old town hall and fixed with care. Nalina taught reading in the mornings, and Elias offered carpentry and leatherwork in the afternoons. The girls, some no older than 10, some already with scars too deep for childhood, soaked in every lesson like dry roots drinking water. One day a knock echoed through the gate. A woman stood there, eyes wide with fear, a bruised child on her hip. We heard about you, the woman whispered. They said you don't turn anyone away. Nalina nodded. Come in, you're safe here. And so the word spread. Each week brought another runaway, another mother, another girl who had been told she was too different, too poor, too scarred to matter. They arrived with nothing, and they left with hope, but not everyone was pleased. A banker from downstate arrived, his mustache stiff and suit too clean for these parts. "Miss Nelina," he said, barely hiding his condescension, "you're harboring fugitives. That puts you and this entire operation in violation of several laws." She stood tall. "We're sheltering survivors. Call them what you want. If you don't shut this down, there'll be consequences." Elias stepped beside her, silent but firm. "This land's paid for. The sheriff's on our side. And so are a dozen other ranches who owe their wives, sisters, or daughters to this place. You really want that fight?" The banker left in a huff. He didn't return. That night, Nelina sat with Elias beneath the stars. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. "Not in 1,000 lifetimes." She chuckled, but there was a heaviness in her voice. "Sometimes I wonder what I would have become if that train had taken me to a husband who wanted me dead." "You became exactly who you were meant to be." As the fire crackled and the moon rose high, the girls inside Cedar Refuge slept soundly. Safe, loved, and because one woman, half Apache, half fire, had refused to be erased. She didn't just survive. She made space for others to rise too. It began with a silhouette on the hill. The women in the barn spotted it first. A lone rider, still as stone, watching from the distance. He came every dusk for 3 days, never closer, never farther. On the 4th day, Elias saddled his horse. "I'm going up there," he said. "I'll come too," Nelina offered. He paused. "You sure? If this place is going to be tested, I want to face it with you." The sun dipped low as they climbed the ridge, the sky painted gold and blood. At the top, the rider dismounted. It was Thomas, Nelina's older brother, the one who had vanished into the territories years ago after refusing to live under the laws of white men. "You built this," he said quietly, taking in the view of Cedar Refuge below. "I heard stories. I didn't believe them." "Believe them now," she said. He looked at Elias with suspicion, then softened when he saw how Elias's hand instinctively rested behind her back. "You happy?" he asked her. "I didn't come here to be happy," she replied. "I came here to make something better than what we were given." Thomas nodded. "Good. You'll need that fire. There's talk in the South. Men who don't like a place like this existing think it's dangerous." "It is," Elias said. "Dangerous to men who profit from cruelty." That night, the three of them sat around the fire, sharing a meal and plans. Thomas didn't stay, he never did, but he gave Nelina a hand-carved pipe and a warning: build strong fences, but stronger friendships. And then he rode off into the dark. Weeks passed. Then one night, gunshots. 3 riders came after midnight. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't ask questions. They wanted destruction. But Cedar Refuge wasn't undefended. Elias and Thomas had taught the older girls to shoot. The women had built trenches, hidden alarm bells, secured every door. By the time the attackers reached the barn, they were met with lanterns and a line of rifles aimed steady. "Turn back," Nelina said, standing at the front, her voice iron. They did. They never returned. Years later, travelers from every edge of the frontier told tales of a place deep in the prairie where broken women became warriors and the lost were welcomed home. Some said it was a myth. Others said it was magic. But Nelina just called it what it was. The place they couldn't burn,